Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The series of scams and scandals, some wholly believable, some not so believable, tumbling out with alarming regularity, have created a situation in the country where people's confidence in the system, and more so who run the systems, seem to be eroding rapidly. The political class, which is mainly the target of these exposés, some motivated of course, has led to the political class presenting itself as a victim. People who are exposing these scams with the active and sometimes unthinking media support have been adopting the role of investigators, prosecutors and judge without even waiting for the established institutions to come into the picture. The common man, deluged by these images and words on 24/7 TV channels and newspapers, are showing signs of confusion, even as convenient conclusions are being drawn by many according to their political leanings. In all this finger-pointing at the political class, one class which has spawned these huge instances of corruption and manipulation, the corporate and business class, has escaped focused attention. The media's role has also come under scrutiny, with charges of it being irresponsible. Is all this leading to an anarchic situation? Or are such exposés ultimately going to be good for the country? Is the Indian psyche getting scarred by all these depressing stories all over the media? We will discuss all this with an eminent panel of guests. I have with me Mr. T.S.R. Subramanian, former Cabinet Secretary, Professor Mridula Mukherjee, historian and Professor, Center for Historical Studies, JNU, and Vinod Mehta, editorial chairman of the Outlook Group. Welcome to all of you. Let me go to Mr. Vinod Mehta first. Mr. Vinod Mehta, constantly when all these things are happening, we are always, reminded of some of the instances of corruption in the past. We have seen the Bofors, we have seen many of the other things in the past. But what kind of a difference do you see in the present atmosphere and say in the atmosphere in the 80s when Bofors broke out? What is the major difference, or do you think there is any difference at all?
No, well, the difference is that the scams that are being exposed have a measure of credibility in them. And the problem is that these scams are being exposed on almost a daily basis.
Yes. And
some middle class anger or middle class rage against the system is being generated.
Right.
But the problem, and the very dangerous problem, is the fact that this middle class rage must be channeled into some institutional format. If you just have rage, random rage knocking around, then it's very dangerous.
Right.
And the people, India Against Corruption, etc., have done a commendable job in some respects in giving us a glimpse of how corrupted our system has become.
Right.
But they have left it at that.
Right.
And so what is the danger is that God knows what will happen. People are getting angry and they are asking us, what are you going to do about it?
Yes.
And we don't have any answers there.
Right. Mr. Subramanian, we have no answers to these things. Okay, I mean, it's a process. The process itself is alarming.
Yeah.
Especially in the last couple of years that we have been seeing, the process itself has become alarming. It is confusing the common people also,
I'm not quite sure if the analysis is absolutely correct. What you say is...
No, I'm asking you a question.
Yes. I think the poor India, or rural India, if you want to put it that way,
yes,
or the poor urban and the majority of rural India is used to a terrible block tehsil governmental apparatus, a very corrupt local daroga, and where every FIR is a matter of the best bid kind of a thing.
Right.
All of that, in black marketing, everything is well known. And they have contempt for the local politician.
Right.
At the same time, they have an entente cordiale. They manage to live together with the local politician. What is new to them now is that what they see there, the same thing is happening in Delhi. I think it's more like Ramayana Mahabharata, that they are seeing from a distance. As far as middle class is concerned, I agree with Vinod that it is a bit of a shock. They always had contempt for the politician, but now chapter and verse, it's getting proved.
Yes.
And the third side is the upper class, the business class, the class that you mentioned. I think that class feels everything is perfect. They are in fact probably a little worried that the space that they had...
that this perfect situation may become imperfect for them.
So new roadblocks may come in the
form of regulations.
In the crony capital kind of situation. I don't think there's anything to get alarmed at this stage. If there is a major problem in our governance system and corruption in the system, which is definitely there, it is now coming out. I think a very good manthan is necessary. We need to purge it. We need to have more credibility in the governance process, more credibility in our politicians and our bureaucrats, what they say. But again, the question, how is it going to be channeled? Because we now find, give me just half a second to elaborate this point. The fundamental mistake was made in our constitution, that we created a political class without checks and balances, unlike in other countries. And therefore, that class is not willing to give up the power. That essentially is it. They're quite brazen about it. They are now said, go to hell, I don't care for you. And I will go straight to the people and get their vote one way or the other, you don't matter. And therefore, Vinod Mehta's question is a good question. There is undoubted anger in the middle class, which always moves all movements. All movements, revolutions come to the middle class. In this case, the question is, how is it going to get channeled? And that's $1 million question. And I think Anna Hazare started that process. He self-destructed and he was destroyed.
Professor Mridula Mukherjee, Mr. Subramaniam says that the political class, there was a mistake made in the constitution. The political class was, there were no checks and balances for the political class. But it's very ironical that today we hear that the political class is, showing itself as the victim of all this process. What's happening?
If I may disagree with him a little bit.
Yeah, please.
I don't know what he's referring to. I would like him to elaborate why he thinks there are no checks, because the political class has to get elected at least every 5 years or less. The bureaucracy doesn't have to after they pass that one exam. I'm sorry. So the checks and balances seem to be much less in the case of the institution of the bureaucracy. And one of my criticisms would be that in this whole debate about corruption, we are not talking about the systemic issues, and therefore we are not talking about corporate corruption, we are not talking about bureaucratic corruption. We are only, because it suits us. By us, I mean those who are leading this whole daily theatre in the TV, before the TV cameras. It's wonderful theatre. Why should one go to Mandi House when you can get much better entertainment sitting in your drawing room, free of cost, great histrionics, wonderful actors, the best people in the country. But we're not really talking about systemic issues. Look, corruption is not something that has been born in India. It's been with us, it's been in every society, but in the modern industrial society, corruption comes at certain stages of the evolution of structures. Why don't we talk about why it arises, what other people have done to take care of these issues, what are the stages through which we go through, and what do we need to do, rather than just saying everybody's a thief, sab chor hai, sab chor hai. I turn around and say, you're a chore, you turn around and say, I'm a chore, but we don't go forward. But we delegitimize whatever we have.
What is the impact of this sab chore hai attitude, what you're talking about?
Yeah.
What is the impact of this kind of situation on the Indians, on the psyche of the common man?
In fact, I must say that this is something I've been saying from the beginning of the time that the India Against Corruption movement started last year, is that the greatest danger of this movement, whatever positive it may or may not do, is the delegitimization of existing institutions without providing an alternative.
Right.
So that is the danger side. Right. And what happens in such situations, we all know. When democracy gets delegitimized in people's minds, then you get military rule and you get dictatorship. And that is the real long-term worry.
We are joined in now by Professor Deepak Pental, former Vice Chancellor of Delhi University. Professor Pental, welcome to the show. Professor Mukherjee was talking about, this delegitimizing of institutions. Do you agree that such delegitimizing is taking place? And if you think it is taking place, what is the impact it will have on the common man? on the psyche of the common man?
See, if trust is lost in institutions,
Right.
it's bound to affect, let's say, young people in their formative years. They'll say, what is happening around
Right.
us? A common person will say, what's going on? So, I believe that, we started after independence with great idealism.
Right.
This is also another misfortune because the ideals were very high. And somehow the society did not really come up to those ideals. It's not only politicians, it's educated people also. We may say middle class is very angry, but what is the middle class doing? Wherever in huge bureaucracies constituted only of middle class.
Right.
And if they were so upright, we might not have had so much of difficulty as we are facing today. My feeling is two things, this may be too simplistic, but I think two things need to be done. One is that the political parties, whatever money they get, should be out in the public domain of what they are spending on their elections.
Transparency.
Absolutely. Without that, they will be delegitimizing themselves further and creating more and more trouble for themselves and for the country. It's a hard profession, politicians. Like some of us, nobody will give us one single vote, I mean, it's not so easy. But it is on them only to now seek a new legitimacy through more forthrightness and more transparency. And the second thing I believe, no country can make it big without a good legal system.
Right.
Now we have good legal system in spurts. Sometimes it is very good, but what about cases sticking in the courts for 10 years, 15 years? I mean, I think in 1 year there should be a decision on a case, then it can go to High Court, then it can go to Supreme Court. Is it so difficult for our great country to have a more time-bound, a more timely delivery of justice? Is it difficult for us?
The record so far shows it's damn difficult.
No, but then everything is going to be difficult for us. Show me one country which has reached greatness without having a legal system which delivers justice in a
time-bound
time frame. So we don't want transparency. We don't want a institution of justice system. Then I think we will just go on doing debate. I think these are the two fundamentals.
It can lead to an anarchic kind of situation.
Well, what is the use,
Let me get Mr. Vinod Mehta. Mr. Vinod Mehta, in all this, the role the media has been playing, there have been several discussions. We have been constantly discussing about the role of the media. There is an element of unthinking, attitude of the media. See, for instance, these 24/7 television channels have created a new kind of dynamics and new parameters. We all agree. But when during the days of the print, there was time for us to sit and see whether what is being said, the press conferences held, people making exposés, whether they are right, wrong. We had that comfort, but now there doesn't seem to be. Everybody is on 24/7 live television channels. And isn't this also causing some kind of all these confusions in the minds also?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. 24/7 news channels have created a new genre of news.
Yes.
News as entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely.
News where instant justice is given.
Right.
News where you try a person and you pronounce him guilty. And that's why the people who appear on news television are people who have black and white views. If your views are more nuanced, they don't like it. But you see, there's a complexity here.
Right.
The middle class, the urban middle class at least, is lapping up this kind of television.
Absolutely.
And so television marches to its own tune. It has its own format.
Right.
And its format is get people angry, get people engaged, get people to shout at each other. And in the end, if you have two party spokespersons, the third person might just withdraw. I mean, Mr. Subramaniam and I have been in so many programs where Manish Tiwari versus Ravi Shankar Prasad take over, and we don't get a word in edgeways.
Yes,
and that is called a civilized, balanced debate. In the end, what you're having is people shouting at each other, making charges and counter charges. There is no clarity at all.
Mr. Vinod Mehta.
But I am completely. I don't know what I can prescribe as a solution, because, as I said, news television marches to its own tune.
Mr. Vinod Mehta, there is no filter. The filter of, the editorial filter, which is very essential when dealing with news, that doesn't just seem to exist on television. And, it is just...
No, but you see, in news channels, they don't have editors. You have a reporter who is filing from the field and it goes straight in on the screen.
Yes.
So whereas in the print media, when a reporter does the story, it goes through many layers of checking and counter-checking.
Yes.
But 24/7 television goes straight from the field into the camera. And in fact, you never hear of a person called an editor or a news editor in a TV channel.
Absolutely.
There is the anchor and there is the reporter.
There is the reporter, and there is nothing in between. Anyway, we need to continue this discussion. We will come back very soon. We need to go into a short break. Please keep watching. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. We are discussing the various scandals and scams which are tumbling out on a daily basis, and asking the question, how is it affecting the Indian psyche? Mr. Subramaniam, in all these discussions, like Mridula was earlier pointing out, one class, the corporate class, and the corporate class and the business class seem to be getting away quite,
I think in 90s, Vora, who is now governor in J&K,
right.
He was then Home Secretary. He wrote
the classic document.
Yes. It's still not been formally published.
Yes.
On the bureaucrat businessman nexus. On the politician businessman nexus.
Right.
Which is absolutely true.
Yes.
Now take the case of this boy, this gentleman, Khemka,
right,
who is in the news in Haryana.
Yes.
He has been transferred 41 times.
41 times in 20
about
years.
3 to 4 months each posting.
Right.
Now, he has an outstanding service record.
Right.
Outstanding service record. And this selection to joint secretary is 1 in 3. And he has no adverse entry. Universally seen as straightforward.
Right.
From TV, he appears to have above high IQ.
Yeah.
He is a PhD and from a high institution.
Right.
Why was he transferred? That means this particular incident has come out in the open.
Right.
There were 39 other incidents of a similar nature,
right,
concerning some mafia or the other, where he was inflexible, where most others were flexible.
Right.
I agree with everything that has been said by everybody here, but we are looking at the symptoms.
Right.
I wanted to focus again, come back to the root cause. If in a company after 60 years, you can say in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you can say this is not functioning well, that's not functioning well. If there is 70% poverty, if there is 65% illiteracy, if India is the poor health malnutrition capital of the world, there has been something fundamentally wrong, not just with the middle class. Either you say the country is rotten, which I am sure it is not. I have, without going into details, I have evidence to show that the country's human material is probably the best in the world, with no qualifications, even in the remotest areas in the poorest classes, which means that in a company goes wrong year after year, don't blame the Dharman, don't blame the driver, don't blame the general manager, the board of directors.
Absolutely.
Because it is, if the bureaucracy is corrupt, why were they allowed so? Why was Khemka allowed 40 transfers? He should have been thrown out after the second transfer if he is unfit.
Absolutely.
Or raised to a good level after that. So I am only going to the root cause now, that I am not saying the politicians are badmash, the rest of India is all very pure and honest. I am saying they have the reins of the horse today. They have not managed their job very well. That's the point I am making. I am not saying they're inferior to the middle class or to the common people, etc., or they have different moral standards. I am only saying they have failed to govern us. If corruption is rampant, basic problems after 70 years have not been sorted out. Why? Why is it that in speech after speech of the President and the Prime Minister, honesty in government is not mentioned? I have seen poverty removal is not mentioned in the last 15 years. I have not seen good public health is not. Vague generalities is there. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. But why programs are not mentioned like in USA?
The recent US presidential debates is a classic example of how we don't conduct our elections and how the elections are conducted there. Right. Professor Pentel, you know, Mr. Subramaniam spoke about this symptom, the root cause and all that. The thing is, where is it all heading towards? Where are we heading towards? You know, are the people of this country now slowly getting to believe that only an authoritarian system can put the things right? Isn't that the danger which we're heading towards?
See, we have gone through some very hard times after independence. Lot of challenges. We have survived all that. I am a firm believer that we are going to survive all this.
Yes.
And there is no other method of governance than democracy.
Absolutely.
So that should be also very clear. Now it is for the political class, with all kind of pressures coming on them, they have to get up and do something to redeem themselves. And that is true about bureaucracy. I would stick my neck out and say here that there is a general cultural deficit also, little bit here, which we are not ready to acknowledge. I don't think we have great respect for what is held in common. You know, we just don't have that kind of social thinking. We are for family, we are very conscious about our stature, our caste, our class. We are not so conscious about what is held in common. And institutions are common property. In a great democracy, institutions are the key thing in a democracy. Now, if we allow our institution, like institution of judiciary,
right,
institution of a political party, what is a political party? It's an institution. And we have a right to look into that institution. You take Congress party, it is such a long history.
Right.
The other parties, Communist party, is a long history. Now, we should be able to look into their affairs. Do they have enough democracy? Are they explaining to the country where they are getting their funds?
But the problem is the majority of the political parties have become family-owned property.
The pressure will remain on political parties, the pressure will remain on bureaucracy, the pressure will remain on judiciary until unless they redeem themselves by bringing about reforms which are absolutely essential. And you know, this is no great side. You look at how Western countries or developed countries build themselves. Science and technology, great institutions, good legal system, democracy. We have democracy, we have a legal system which works, we need to make it better. Yes. We have great political parties with such long history. Now, it is time for them to look inside them and come out like we did RTI. Now, why can't we be taking it further?
That's the point, Professor Mukherjee. You know, it's very ironical that in these last 7 or 8 years of the UPA rule, some of the legislation which it has brought in, some of the anti-corruption measures which it has taken, like Professor Pentel pointed out, the RTI which has actually opened up all these avenues for these exposés. You know, but still this government at this point of time seems to be facing the biggest taint, as if it is this is the government which has done most when it comes to trying to deal with the matter of corruption, but it is seen as the most corrupt. How do you explain this dichotomous situation?
I think that's why I think that the movements or the campaigns which are being carried on are not very responsible campaigns, because responsible campaigns want to succeed by giving you a total picture. You know, the people who, for example, fought for the right to information bill, which in my opinion is far more important for checking corruption and all these things than the Lokpal can ever be, because that's a punitive bill, whereas the right to information is an enabling bill, which makes, as they said, a member of parliament out of everybody. Everybody can ask a question to the highest of the land. Now, look at the manner in which that happened. People started building that movement from the grassroots. Aruna Roy, Nikhil Dey, the whole Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan. They worked at it for years. Then they worked on the political class. They worked within the National Advisory Council. They had dharnas, they had, okay, no, point here is, then they worked within the parliament.
But this is good. We should
I'm
take it
saying
forward now.
exactly,
Go
that's
forward.
my point.
So what-
that
what-
this
what-
is the processes.
Professor Mukherjee, what you're
there are
trying to say
healthy
is,
processes
what you're
which
trying
we
to say
need to
is
take forward.
the hit and run approach of some of these latter day.
Why
or
are
what
we
are saying,
abandoning that? And why are we privileging and lionizing this alternative method?
Mr. Subramanian,
Which
quickly,
has
very,
shown
very
greater
quickly, Mr.
success.
Subramanian.
One short factual comment.
Yes.
And one other comment. The movement for RTI started in government. It was H.D. Shuri who was asked by me to have the first. The cabinet passed it in 1998. Twice it came to the cabinet. The NDA government did not pass it. These people picked it up immediately and passed it.
Right.
Factually. Secondly, you are perfectly correct. But don't forget two things. That the media we have spoken slightly negatively about today. It is the media which is bringing out the negative sides.
Right.
It is also the RTI which is bringing out.
Absolutely.
So I am quite sanguine with these pressures. The changes will start coming, and the political class will have to start responding.
Okay.
But don't underestimate
Okay,
the
we have
movement.
last words to you, Mr. Vinod Mehta. Where are we heading towards? Do you think that the people of this country are so scarred that they will start demanding some kind of an authoritarian system, or do you think that these kind of exposés which are happening will ultimately do good for the country?
Well, I really, I'm not a pundit, and I have very little faith in my own judgment, but where we are heading to. All I can tell you, I whether your panelists do the same thing. When I wake up in the morning, I don't feel like reading the newspaper.
Okay, I think
because I'm so scared about what I will be confronted with, and what new terrible thing has happened to our democracy. I think we are going through a very bad time. We are going through some kind of chaos.
yes.
Whether we will emerge from this cleansed, or whether we will emerge from this with more chaos and anarchy, that we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mehta. I think on that note, as Mr. Mehta and others, we'll have to wait and watch what is going to finally emerge out of it. Anyway, these are tough times. As Mr. Mehta said, these are tough times. Every morning it's tough time for everybody to open their newspapers and see what new scam or scandal has come out. Anyway, thanks to all my guests, Mr. Vinod Mehta, Professor Deepak Pental, Mr. T.S.R. Subramaniam, Professor Mridula Mukherjee. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture, same time on Monday.